Hello, and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast, where you can learn powerful techniques to change the way you feel. I am your host, Dr. Rhonda Borowski, and joining me here in the Murrieta studio is Dr. David Burns. Dr. Burns is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy and the creator of the new team therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 30 languages. His latest book, Feeling Great, contains powerful new techniques that make rapid recovery possible for many people struggling with depression and anxiety. Dr. Burns is currently an emeritus adjunct professor of clinical psychiatry at Stanford University School of Medicine.
Hello, Rhonda.
Hi, David, and welcome to episode 307 to our listeners around the country and across the world. We have 3 extremely exciting guests today. I'm going to introduce them, and then we're going to dive into the show. So today we have...
There's 4 of us, Rhonda. Which one is the unexciting one?
I'll just let the listeners figure that one out. So we have 3 team CBT clinicians of the BAD, which stands for Black African Descent, an affinity group whose members identify as Black African Descent, African Americans, and Black Africans. And we thought it would be really fantastic and wonderful to have them talk about issues that are important to them and important to the team community as a whole. So I'm going to just name all of them so everybody knows who they are. And maybe you could say hi so we can recognize your voice. So the first wonderful therapist I want to introduce is Amber Warner. And Amber Warner is a licensed clinical social worker. She's a level 3 certified team therapist. She lives and works in Lake County, providing mental health care in a rural community. She also has a private practice that includes a virtual practice with the Feeling Good Institute, and she treats anyone who lives in the state of California. And everyone's email addresses will be listed in the show notes if you want to contact people after today's show. We also have Shawn Williams, equally wonderful, who's also a licensed clinical social worker and a level 3 certified team therapist. Shawn works for the Ohio State University. He works with veterans, both active duty and, what is it when you're not active duty, retired, soldiers regarding post-traumatic stress disorder, suicide issues, and trauma reduction. He treats patients and he supports the Ohio State University's research. Shawn has a part-time private practice in Ohio. And our third wonderful therapist is Chelsea Dorsich, who is a marriage and family therapist, also a level 3 certified team therapist, who lives and works in Folsom, California. And she works for the Feeling Good Institute and provides telehealth to anyone in California. So welcome, you guys.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. We're excited to be here. I'm Amber.
And I'm Chelsea.
And I'm Shawn. Yep.
Yeah.
And I'm still David.
Good, David. I was going to say you'll get my voice mixed up with Shawn's, right?
Yep. And my private practice is actually in Indiana. I graduated from Ohio State, but my private practice is in Indiana.
So do you live in Indiana or Ohio?
I'm actually living in Colorado.
And you live in Colorado. Okay.
I'm licensed in Indy. So yeah, my clients will contact me who live in the state of Indiana. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So, yeah, all around.
Yeah. Well, you're kind of tri-state.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd read an endorsement that's kind of general, but it was kind of cool to receive before we dive in. And this is from Steve, who wrote you from the United Kingdom. And he said, "Hi, David. I found your book, Feeling Great, profoundly useful, and the audiobook version immensely helpful as revision and reinforcement to the text and the exercises. I'm now reading Feeling Good Together and learning how to manage the dance. I was surprised and somewhat disappointed to find that the audiobook seems to be limited to the United States and can't be obtained here in the UK. I wasn't sure if you realized that, so I thought I'd mention it just in case the fix is easy. Separately, I wanted you to know I'm working backwards through the podcasts and came across a series of live work with Mark Taslimi, which are 7 podcasts, beginning with podcast 29 and ending with podcast 35. And there's also a follow-up podcast, which is number 141. My feedback is that this format is by far the best learning experience for me from the hundreds of podcasts I have listened to so far. Spreading over many episodes has no downside and is a huge upside in my opinion, because the interweaving of your comment and review along with the subject matter, the discussion and brainstorming with Jill as to which methods to use, your discussion of the details behind the techniques, the intimate access to your thought processes inside the actual mechanics of the process is just wonderful. Thank you again for such a magnificent resource, and please do encourage listeners to reach back into the older material on the podcast, as it is golden, and so many of today's generation see older and think obsolete. Every single one of the hundreds of episodes has so much value. What a resource. Regards, Steve.
Well, thank you, Steve. That's very, very kind and affirming, too, because we're thinking of the podcasts as resources, both for therapists who want to learn these techniques and also for, general citizens, lay people who want to use these techniques in your own life. And there's also a lot of other resources, free resources on the website as well. There's a free depression class, a free anxiety class, and tons of stuff there. So if you want to learn about Team CBT or getting over depression or anxiety, go and check it out. And one other little commercial message, although it's totally non-commercial, is if you're interested in checking out our app, we're gearing up now for a bunch of new beta tests. So you can just go to the feelinggood.com/app and sign up. You have to have an iPhone. We're hoping to raise some funds so we can get the other versions of it to use with regular type cell phones and computers as well. But right now, that's the only limitation. And then I've got this workshop coming up with Jill on social anxiety, right, Rhonda?
Yes, October 2nd.
Yeah, and so that'll be a fun one. I think it's called Smashing Social Anxiety or Shame Attacking and Beyond or something like that. It'll be a really fun workshop, and it's both for the general public and therapists. There'll be a lot of teaching of techniques that are pretty wild and powerful and fun to use. And it'll also have some experiential components too, in case you're struggling with social anxiety, which includes, for some reason, an awful lot of mental health professionals, at least the ones in our Tuesday group.
Yeah, and one more plug about the Feeling Great Book Club, which is starting September 13th. And you can go to feelinggreattherapycenter.com/book club and learn how to join this book club to read Feeling Great together, Feeling Great, together with Brandon Vance and Heather Clegg and lots of other really cool people.
Well, that tells me 2 other things. Zaina Halim, who's been on our podcast several times, is offering a Feeling When Panic Attacks book club. I'll send out a flyer on that pretty soon. I think that'll be a 12-week thing. And then also she's going to partner up with us to do our first test of the Feeling Good app alone versus the Feeling Good app with a live therapist coach who would be having an hour a week practice sessions and Q&A sessions, an hour and a half or 2 hours a week for a month. The one with the live therapist will be a paid one. We app people won't get anything for that, but Zaina will be charging that because that'll be part of her clinical work. But it'll be fun to find out if how the app alone competes with the app plus some human helpers. So there's a lot of exciting stuff coming up for those of you who want to work on your own issues or improve your therapy skills.
Nice. Cool. Well, let's turn to you guys, Amber, Shawn, and Chelsea. How did you guys form your affinity group? And tell us about it. How did you get started and what are your goals?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, this is Amber. I'll share a little bit of the backstory. And before I do that, David, we just all to extend our gratitude to you for all that you've done with Team CBT and your teaching that you continue to do at no cost on Tuesdays. I'm a member of the Tuesday group, and it's really been life-changing. So I think we're all here because we're dedicated to Team CBT, and we wouldn't have without you and your leadership. So.
Thank you so much. And we do have some openings now in the Tuesday group at Stanford. It's West Coast time, 5 to 7 every Tuesday evening. The only requirements are to come consistently. It's not a drop-in group, and we sometimes do live work. So contact me, and I'll put you in touch with Ed Walton, who's would give you the orientation and information. It's unlimited free psychotherapy training. Can't beat that deal.
And especially when it's led by you and Jill. So it's awesome. And how we really got started, one of the incidents that started the desire in me to have a group such as this was attending one of your Sunday trainings, David. And in that training, we were going over the individual downward arrow, which is absolutely one of my most favorite tools. And before the training, I was involved in another training that weekend and really left that training with this profound sadness and grief and wasn't sure why I was feeling that way. And it was so heavy on me that I really thought when it came time to do the individual downward arrow that this probably isn't going to be helpful. And lo and behold, it was extremely helpful because not only was I to get to the source of what was bothering me, but when we went to turn to the list of self-defeating beliefs, I was able to look at those common lists there. And I realized that what I was feeling wasn't on the list per se, that reflected my experience. And so it allowed me the opportunity to be creative because you always inspire us to think of other tools. And you know that this is just the beginning and a leap pad, but there could be things that really resonate with you more deeply. And that's exactly what happened. And so I named it The Weight of the World. At that point, I was really feeling this weight of the world on my shoulders, and that's what the grief was, and the dilemma that I was going through in my life. So at that moment, I felt like, wow, wouldn't it be great if I had other people I could talk to about this that look like, that identify as my racial background and see if this resonates with them as well. So that was almost like maybe probably a year and a half ago, because I was at the beginning of 2021. And then one of our colleagues, actually, Rhonda, he's part of your group with the Feeling Great group. Philip was teaching a 12-week group for African-American therapists. He's very, very passionate about that and reached out to me because he wasn't aware of any level 3 certified therapists that were African-American, and extended the invitation for me to partner with him and to teach this course. And which was amazing because he's not African-American, but very passionate about spreading team to African-American clinicians. And so I was able to attend that course and started to get the idea of, wow, he's put together this group of 6 or 7 other therapists. And what are we going to do after their introduction, their new introduction to Team CBT? And so then that challenged me a little bit to look into my resources. And I reached out to Chelsea. Chelsea and I meet weekly as part of our FGI meeting. And soon after that, I had started the team training on Tuesday. So now I'm stalking people in trainings, right? Like I'm looking for if anyone looks like they might identify as African-American, And I sent Shawn a message, which was, hey, I hope I'm not trying to be too forward, but I'm just wondering, would this interest you? And once I had, and on Facebook, there's a Facebook group that I'm part of that's for clinicians of color. So I started to really look through those messages and see who might have posted about Team CBT and reaching out to them. And so one woman, Dr. Kareen, and I connected, and it was really the four of us that said, yes, we want this. And I knew, well, if we only have a meeting of four of us, then I'm successful. So that's how we got started.
Nice. So in your work together, have you identified any challenges becoming a team clinician, or any barriers for clients seeking treatment that's particularly relevant to your affinity group or your discussions?
Yeah, I think one of the barriers, especially for becoming a clinician of color, is not even getting into the team certification, but just the whole process of becoming a clinician. I know just in my journey, you have to, in order to become a master level clinician, or even a PsyD or psychologist, you have to get your bachelor's degree, of course, and then you have to move on to get your master's degree. And if you don't come from generational wealth, of course, you're going to be taking out a lot of loans. And then, even at that point, you still can't treat clients because they're saying wait a second, you need 3,000 or so clinical, depending on your, the institution that you go to. And then, and that can take up to, 2 years or even more. And then you have to pass a licensure exam. And so I think that can serve as a barrier, because it can be a pretty daunting process. And I think one of the purposes of creating this forum is, to have, clinicians that might have some difficulty, navigating this process. They can come to this group, and we've all been there, and we can kind of assist them on the journey. Many of us have started private practices as well as clinicians of color, and help them with that aspect as well. So,
I have another question for you. In addition to taking a long time and costing a lot of money, did you learn anything of value? And I don't mean that, facetiously, but seriously, because in my training, which was psychiatry residency and medical school, I didn't learn a whole lot that was of much help to me. I learned about drugs in the psychiatric residency, but I haven't prescribed a drug for 30 years. Clearly they're helpful for some people, but the things that I learned in residency, you just say, you nod, and you get people to talk, and you give them prescriptions, and I didn't see much change from using those techniques.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
I had a similar experience as well. I'd be honest with you, when we met, like I said, me and David have a relationship stemming back to 2008, when I kind of randomly sent him an email, and I was looking for training, for advanced training, and he graciously, invited me to his house. And honestly, that was the best training, way better, exceeded the stuff that I learned in school, because it was very practical in terms of helping people get better. Of course, there was, you learned about all the theories, but in terms of actually seeing people radically improve, I would say much of that, came from my, my team experience.
Mm. So, Shawn, you've been involved with trainings with David since 2008. So you were one of the original trainees with him.
Yeah, I didn't even realize. I guess I was in the earlier part. I thought it had been going on for quite a bit, but I think it had started. Am I correct, David? Because I was there in 2008. I think it started maybe a few years before.
Yeah, around 2000 and through there, because I'd been doing by volunteer teaching at Stanford in the inpatient unit and helping people with research.
Okay.
And then the inpatient unit changed around late 1990s. So I tried to think of some new volunteer activity and started the group, maybe even a little before 2000, but it started with just 2 people who were residents I was supervising. And I said, why don't you combine your hours and you'll have a 2-hour kind of group training experience, because you can learn from each other as we discuss your cases. And then it evolved to have more and more residents. And then I finally decided, let's just open it to community clinicians. And now, to be honest with you, our Tuesday group has people from all over the United States and all over the world in it. And your Wednesday group is the same.
Right, that's right.
Rhonda.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Amber, you started to say that when you felt some sadness or grief after a particular workshop, and then you did an individual downward arrow and you identified, you were looking at the self-defeating beliefs and none quite fit your situation and you created one. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. It was kind of along the lines of maybe the Superwoman, Superman, but that wasn't really resonating for me at the time. The situation that was going on in my life was I had found out that my employer had hired new people with less experience than myself, had their degrees a lesser time than me, but at a higher rate. And unfortunately, that then had me feeling a certain type of way, feeling about myself as, I'm less than. And also because I have, I think, David, as you talk about most therapists, I don't want to rock the boat, don't want to make sure everybody's happy. It was a challenge for me. What am I going to do? Am I going to stand up and reach out to my employer and have this conversation? So the overwhelming grief dilemma seemed to be more in line with my thinking of, well, if I don't stand up and this is a personal injustice for me, then I'm not standing up in a way for all of those that were oppressed in all of this realm of oppression, right? Like that's how we get the cognitive distortion and the cognitive misthinking. So it felt like this heavy weight, this heavy dilemma. And that's where oftentimes there might even be other analogies to the weight of the world, like the African-American woman has the weight of the world on her shoulders. And I'm sure other people do too. But again, we're talking about my personal experience. And so that's what aligned with me at the time.
What happened? Did you talk to your employer?
I sure did. That individual downward arrow helped me and those self-defeating beliefs and talking back to these cognitive distortions. And it ended up in my favor. So I appreciate that. It took time though. It took time because it wasn't like one day I'm feeling this. This is over months of me becoming more and more aware of what was happening to me and me coming up with a plan of assertiveness. And I think that's what I love about the team tools, at least my personal experience. Like I wouldn't be here if I didn't personally have a resignation with the team tools. It just puts me at such an unconscious level, things that I'm aware that I'm thinking, but dictate my behavior. So somehow I was thinking I'm not worth more, or they're not going to listen to me. But that was more on an unconscious level than I was consciously aware of it.
One thing I've noticed about you and group is that you're becoming a powerful young force to be reckoned with. My efforts to shine compliments on you haven't always been successful, sadly. But I've been very proud of you and very noticing that, powerful blood in your veins, not only for yourself, but for the people that you're working with and treating and for your colleagues. And to me, it's very, very cool. When I was in high school, after my junior year, another fellow in my class, Bob Smellick, and I hitchhiked from Phoenix to New York to go to a student council convention, National Student Council Convention. And we had a lot of fun along the way. As I recall, it was mainly a kind of a whitey type experience there at that convention, but we met a lot of really cool people along the way, and we could sleep overnight at the floor of their house and stuff like that. But the thing that was so shocking to us when we were in New York at this convention was the kids from the South. They were so entrenchedly anti-Black, and we tried to kind of reason with them and connect with them. And it was almost like we were working with people who were delusional or psychotic. It was they were so totally entrenched that Black people are inferior, and that was obvious, and it wasn't open to any kind of challenge. It was like a Mount Everest type of thing. And I never, that memory never left me, how rigid this system of hatred and judgment is. I saw kind of in our church too. My dad was a minister, and he was pretty successful. But we had a white church there in Phoenix, and his congregation loved him and all. But I also thought there was a lot of bias in our religion. It didn't seem to be always about loving people. But we always had a Black janitor, so that was some mark of racial pride. Look, we have a Black person here. And if you were Jewish, you were okay if you found Jesus as your Lord and Savior. Otherwise, you were going to hell and stuff like that. And so it's just painful. And I guess we all have these biases, but and right now the world is, your way to the world, it seems like there's an awful lot of hatred moving into ascendancy again, all around the world. And I shouldn't talk, I should be listening.
No, but I think on top of what you're saying, it resonates with me, because even though obviously the experience of racism is not a distortion, but people who kind of adopt that racist ideology, you can find almost every single distortion in there, like emotional reasoning.
Oh yeah.
So I feel that this group of people are inferior, therefore, they are, and I think a lot of even when I look at minimization, that's another one where we kind of minimize our biases. I think we all have certain prejudices, and just to kind of acknowledge these things.
It's positive distortions is what it is. We're these superior people, and boy, does that feel good.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things we were talking about before was that if a question to ask everyone is that, when someone has experienced racial trauma, or they have experienced being discriminated against, how is that? We talk about all the time cognitive distortions, and Shawn, you brought that up, and errors in our thinking. But if someone is really feeling that they've been discriminated against, or they've experienced racial trauma, how is that an error in their thinking? Or how is that a cognitive distortion? How would a team therapist deal with that if their client came to them and brought this up as an issue?
Well, there's an awesome answer to that question, and Shawn will now reveal it.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, I think that there isn't a distortion, right? It's not to say that there's something unhelpful about that. I think about when you've had those experiences, I think that we can let those experiences shape future ones, or we put mind reading and labeling, and right, we can definitely walk into situations where we assume something similar is going to happen. And I think that's where the cognitive distortions can be really helpful to, but I think the idea is that when you're looking at those thoughts, to really acknowledge the truth in it, and just unpack it, seeing if there is anything unhelpful or distorted, and maybe there will be, but it's still without dismissing or taking away someone's experience that really did happen and that really was painful. And I think that's the idea though. But for me, that's just, even with, which I love, just, gosh, cognitive distortions are so powerful, and I love using them on myself, on therapists, or on my clients. But I think in terms of the racial trauma, it's having room for validity, and that really happened, but also knowing that maybe we can also let those experiences, lead us to some distorted thinking in the future, and to be able to kind of unpack that and, I guess, dissect it in a way.
Yeah, there's a healthy and an unhealthy version of every negative emotion. There's healthy grief, and then unhealthy depression. There's healthy fear, and there's, anxiety disorders, which aren't particularly helpful. And there's healthy anger and unhealthy anger. And who was the fellow who died, and he was talking about good anger or good battles or something like that? He was a famous congressional Black guy, one of the great luminaries of probably the last 30 or 40 years.
Oh, wow. Not sure.
Had some expression like that.
When I was...
I think you mean John Lewis?
Yeah.
You're speaking about John Lewis? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's who.
Yeah. But I wasn't sure about the actual quote. He has many, but he definitely was a leader in civil rights and fairness and, equity, for sure. A beacon for all of us. Absolutely.
And
I think, go ahead, Shawn. Sorry.
No, I was saying, I was just building off of what like Chelsea had said, because we're talking the other day about how many of our clients, I think Amber's had a different experience, but I know in terms of, a lot of our clients, they will come in with the same issues as anyone else, whether it's, anxiety, depression, trauma. And then usually it's not necessarily like a presenting problem, for at least for my clients, where it's like, it's, related to race, but usually like within the course of treatment, things related to race or microaggressions will kind of manifest itself. And like, one particular example I had with a client in my private practice, he was, in the military, and he was sharing with me a very painful, experience that he had gone through. And it was actually on the day of that Trump was actually had been elected. And he heard all these, it was like 5 or 6 white guys in the barracks, and they were cheering and, celebrating his victory. But it was the other part that he heard that deeply disturbed them. They were screaming out that, they're so glad that that N-word is out of the office now. And these were guys that he actually, that he knew. And he was, and that's where I kind of used, that 5 secrets, right? I kind of honored, his feelings and the pain and the anger that he was experiencing. Cause, he said, these were guys that he would literally lay his life down, like, during deployment. And here they are, making these very hurtful statements. So sometimes it's just about really just validating, the experience. And that goes a long way, regardless of the race of the therapist, to helping, really kind of facilitate that healing process for the person.
For a while, I was doing a trauma workshop, and I did quite a few cities in the United States and Canada. And one of the things I was talking about there is something I call the abuse contract. that when someone has been abused, there's a kind of a three-part contract that you have to agree to if you're the one who's being abused. And the first is that it's your fault. Well, the first one is I get to take advantage of you. I get to hurt you. I get to exploit you. That's the first part of the contract. The second part of it is all this badness is due to you. This is all your fault because you're bad and I'm superior. And then the third part of the contract is we have to keep this secret. If you even imply to me that I'm doing something to exploit you, I'll hurt you really, really bad. And then, I've treated people like a woman who had been sadistically abused for 5 years by a babysitter from age 5 to 10. And then he got killed in a fight in a bar. But she was severely depressed and kept this a secret until I worked with her, 40 years later. And she was still telling herself, I was a dirty little girl. It was my fault. If anyone found out what happened, they'd think I liked it, type of thing. And this was a very intelligent woman, and yet emotionally she believed that. But that's pretty much like racial bias. The whole history of blacks, we get to exploit you. It's all your fault because you're inferior, and if you speak up, we're really going to hurt you. And it's
exactly.
It's just amazing how humans have so much joy in exploiting others. I think it's a part of human nature, and then how when you're hurt, how easy it is to buy into these beliefs that are so preposterous.
Well, I think some things that contribute to that, as you're speaking, David, are the fact that racial incidents or microaggressions sometimes are very hard to identify, right? So, for example, I'm the only African-American therapist in my county, the only. So when I would,
and when you say that, Amber, you're not talking about the only team therapist. You're talking about the only therapist. Period. End of discussion. Wow. .com. Right. and so when I finally, because I went through that, right, when it came to the pay, when I finally started speaking out about it, because I'm thinking this is my fault, or my employer probably just made a mistake. And I finally went to share what was going on, what was bothering me with friends. Then they came up, well, do you think this is because you are Black? And I was, no, I don't think so. I mean, I think it's probably just a mistake. Maybe I've been there so long or whatever. But then that stuck with me. And it really wasn't anything. I mean, there was no one to compare me to. So how could we say it was because I was Black or not? It just happened to be that I was working with them for a long time. But these isms, so there's a little bit of ageism, long as, in terms of experience, sometimes they're very hard to pinpoint, but the impact where it took me was exactly what you were saying. You're exploiting me. You're taking advantage of me, and now I'm assuming I need to keep this a secret, because if I bring it up, I'm going to be rocking the boat. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So very powerful. And I feel like for my parents were more, I'm a child of the 70s. And so my parents had a brief moment when they were brought up where there were signs, Blacks go here, and, white only. And this often depend on where you lived. But by the time I was born, we didn't have those signs. So it's not as black and white. It's not as all or nothing. It's more when you're experiencing, racism, or again, the microaggressions, they can be very subtle and hard to pinpoint. hard to identify, but you just know you feel icky afterwards.
You know, it almost feels like racial, like gaslighting almost, you know, where you're just kind of, you know, you're wondering like, is it, is it, where they're kind of giving you these reasons why you're not progressing in your career, that it has, that you're not really seeing what you're actually, your experience is not your experience almost. That's what it kind of seems like almost.
Is that exasperating, the gaslighting?
You said, is that exasperating?
Exasperating, frustrating, irritating.
Oh, yeah, right. Oh, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because you feel like you're going crazy, right?
And it kind of questions your own sense of reality, doesn't it? Like years ago, I was working at Family Court Services, and another therapist and I were the last two people in the office when everybody else had left to go to like a holiday party at a restaurant. And so I drove the two of us to this restaurant, and we got to the table, and we were the last ones sitting. So we were the last ones who got our menus. So we were the last ones who the waitress took our orders. He was African American. And so she took our orders last, and he was a friend of mine, and he said, "She took my order last. Do you think she took my order because I'm Black?" And I thought, first I felt really kind of honored that he was willing to have this discussion with me. But then I said, no, I think she took your order last because we were the last ones seated, and that she just went around the table. And he said, he thinks about that all the time when something happens like that. Is this happening because I'm Black? Or is this happening because, this person has an opinion of me because of who I am? And, it just really struck me what a kind of a burden, and, how much that influenced his life in every way. There's
so much more overt hatred now, like it's on the news all the time. Are you folks experiencing anything different? Because the Black movement is speaking up now, and it's more like things were in the 60s when I was in medical school. There was all this protest going on, and it was about the Vietnam War in those days. But it just seems like the hatred is just way out in the open, and I think Trump kind of gave permission to people to be aggressive and hostile and hateful, and has fueled that. And it's like he threw out some gasoline and dropped a match in it. What has you folks' experience been?
I think it's initially it's so defeating, because you think about like Amber spoke, I have a father who grew up in the South with Jim Crow laws, and you think of all the things he experienced with Black Panthers and all those movements, right? And then you think about, am I really doing this again as I'm raising my children here again in a predominantly white area where it's just, I don't know, defeating. It's overwhelming. It's kind of surreal in the sense that, like, are we doing this again? Like, this is the Twilight Zone that we're like, we've literally feels like we've gone back too many steps instead of forward after our ancestors have fought so much and moved so much forward, So it's definitely defeating.
It's shocking the amount of hatred that's been unleashed and brought to the surface, it seems to me.
It's almost normalized, right? It almost seems weird that this seems like this could be a normal thing. Like somebody higher up normalized that this speech can just be out there again. And
a lot of groups have been radicalized because of what's been going on politically. Absolutely. Yeah.
Go ahead, Amber.
I try to keep in mind, like, those voices have always been there, but I think it's exactly like what you're saying, Dr. Burns, like in the past few years, they've now been given a platform, and a strong platform, right? But it's still the minority. Like, it still is probably anywhere from 23 to 20%. So they've always been there, but it's not a majority. And And like you were sharing, Rhonda, like navigating the world can be exhausting if I I have to use the lens of an African woman, and I show up that way. But at the same time, also with great privilege. So it's that positive reframe that you teach, Dr. Burns, that actually is healing too. And we can have these conversations with tools such as the 5 secrets. I mean, I have a patient because, living in a rural area, majority of my patients are European American. And I actually have a patient who credits me for teaching him not racist anymore. And so, these are moments that stick with heart and give me the help me enjoy that I do when you're making change. Know that I'm not to credit for that, but being that we were able to have heart-to-heart conversations about it has been helpful for him.
When we were talking about organizing this podcast, Shawn, you mentioned research that says there's benefits for clients who are seeking out therapists who have similar racial or culture or ethnic backgrounds. And, Amber, you were talking about the benefit of working with somebody who's a different background than you. But Shawn, I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that.
Research from the Black Journal of Psychology and other articles that kind of, show how that Black clients do have a tendency to seek out Black therapists. And, few of the reasons are just, they want to find someone who they can connect with, someone who understands them, who has the same kind of similar reflected values as them. And it's no different than, in any other arena. I work with veterans, and sometimes you have veterans who come in and they request that they have a therapist who has a similar kind of background. I also work with sexual trauma. I'm actually very effective with working with them, but sometimes you have women that feel more comfortable speaking with another woman, and that's I don't take it personally. Sometimes you just have to meet the client where they're at, and so it's the same thing with when it comes to race, and of course I would love to live in a world where the race of the clinician doesn't matter, but the truth is that we all kind of gravitate towards people with similar commonalities, and I don't necessarily think that society is fundamentally racist, but I think that we have to admit that different races, different cultures, different ethnicities, they experience things differently. So I think what's really important is that if there is an ethnic mismatch, what they say is that to really seek understanding, from someone who does have a lived experience that's different than yours, and be compassionate and just be really intentional with your efforts to help them cope. So,
thanks.
Yeah.
I know I do some work with the Victims Witness Assistance Program, where people who have been victimized by crime get therapy through the district attorney's pays for it. Anyway, so sadly, there are a lot of victims of crime in Oakland, in Walnut Creek, where I live and work, who have been victims of crime. So I often start working with a new patient who's African American or of a different race than me by just acknowledging that I am, I'm a white person, I'm a woman, I've had this background, and is it okay to work with me? Like, do you have any questions about it, or are there any issues that you want to deal with? And I say, I'm really open to hearing about any kind of racial trauma you've experienced, and want that to be a part of the therapy if that works for you. And it's been really helpful to start therapy that way, and opening.
I like that. That sounds cool.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Thanks. Well, do you have thoughts about how to reach out to other therapists of color to incorporate them and to encourage them to learn team therapy and bring them into our team therapy community?
I think honestly, that's kind of like it's been our goal is to basically have this space and I think that we're all working on our level 4s that we think would be so cool to be like level 4 trainers that can definitely attract that group and provide, training that's cost sensitive as well, if that's an issue, but just to really build that community. And, there's so much research as well with affinity groups in general that whether it's at a workplace or maybe at like a college or university, right, that those involve their happiness and their fulfillment in that experience of place of work just skyrockets and it goes up. So that's our goal, is if we can keep building this amazing team CBT community and expand that to more communities. I think that's our utmost goal, and just to have that space. So yeah, we're really excited to be doing this.
Nice. Great work. Amber, you have plans too, don't you?
Yes, we actually we meet monthly. So our group meets one month, the fourth Friday of the month at from 9 to 10 Pacific Standard. Yes, thank you. And Chelsea and I are both part of the Feeling Good Institute. We're looking to, if you're out there and you are just setting up your education and ready to start working on your clinical hours to become a licensed therapist, we're looking for interns that want to get started right away with a great foundation, and we offer that with the Team CBT model. We want to connect worldwide. I think, Rhonda, that's one of the wonderful things about your group, that it's virtual and that you and Richard are leading your connection with Kenya. Those are the women from Kenya are part of our affinity group. So we're looking to expand, wherever you are, if you're identifying as Black, as African American, and like I said, African descent, please reach out to us via email, because we'd love to have you part of our group and to continue to support your team training.
And Amber, we'll put the email address to contact either you or Chelsea or whomever you want in the show notes. But in case people don't read the show notes, could you say what email address somebody should reach out so that if they want to join, if any team therapist or therapist of color wants to join the affinity group, or a therapist, African American, as you described, who would they contact, and what's the email address for that?
Sure, they can contact me. So my email is Amber Warner. My last name is WARNERCSW@gmail.com.
I'm going to repeat that because your voice gets a little distorted, not because of the audio, the electronics, but it's Amber Warner LCSW. That's all one word. Amber, yes. AMBER, Warner, WARNER.
Yes.
LCSW for a licensed clinical social worker at gmail.com. And if anyone would like to join this once a month meeting, Fridays, 9 to 10 West Coast time.
Yes.
And if you're interested in learning more about team or some of the resources, what do you do at your monthly meeting?
So right now, we've been meeting probably about 5 times. So for maybe the 5 past months, we do a check-in with each other, just seeing how everyone's doing. And then we'll start to explore, where people are in their level of certification, and if they need any support around that. Definitely highlight team trainers that and courses that are going on with FGI, as well as what your site, David, has so many free resources, as you mentioned it, and connect people to the podcast. So that's what we're doing right now at those meetings. But as each of us also working toward our level of certification. I'm also now teaching a 6-week course on habits and addiction. And so that is offered. It's already started, but we plan on having more courses available, scholarships available, or training, such as Mike Christensen's training or something, Tyann, or being able to sponsor someone at your Sunday workshops. So this is where we're headed in the future as well.
That's neat. Are your courses for clinicians like to learn how to treat habits and addictions, or are they for people with habits and addictions to learn how to deal with their habits and addictions?
Great way. Very important to clarify. So this course right now is for clinicians, how to use the team tools, and everyone has the ebook. It's to learn how to use our team tools, right?
So, can we give another pitch if you're a Black clinician, African American clinician, or are people of color invited to your group? Do you have to be Black or?
So, in affinity group, it's closed to each ethnic group. So ours is for those that are Black descent, African descent. But we want to encourage other ethnic groups to have affinity groups, or European Americans to have accountability groups where we would be able to discuss privilege and its impact in your therapy with others. We also have to talk about ourselves and acknowledge when we might be in a microaggression, and how do we handle that as well. So I hope that answers your question. I think into another thought, but
can I ask another goofy question that'll probably represent my own bias?
Yes,
sure,
of course.
I have always had the feeling that people of African American descent are kinder and more compassionate because of being subject of aggression and unfairness and so forth, and as opposed to people who were into some kind of white privilege or something, which I think is very real. I mean, we were never wealthy or anything. My dad was just a minister. The most he ever made was $8,000 in a year. But I did go to an almost all white high school, and then I was able to get into Amherst College, which it wasn't like exclusively white, but it's whitish, and get scholarships and stuff like that. And but I just have always had that feeling, and it's probably just as off as a negative bias, but I've always felt that way.
Yeah.
Is that just another kooky belief that I should try to rid myself of?
No, I think that kind of falls in line with the kind of with the reframing that we do. I think when I think there's a lot of strength that comes from the suffering and the kind of the history suffering that we kind of dealt with in the past. So absolutely. But I think that's the importance of like what Amber was talking about with the affinity group of having African descent, African Americans, because I think it's the same issues that exist related to us forming a group, or the same issues that are related to African American clients seeking treatment. It's all kind of the same. It's all the same thing. Is that the vast majority of therapists are white, and so a lot of the clients don't even have to think about there being kind of a connection, and so
yeah, right.
But for clients, it's really a struggle. Like they really would like to find that connection. So I think that's kind of the same thing with the affinity group. Is just finding people that have similar issues and struggles, and we can kind of talk about it, and then also connect with the broader group as well. I think that's equally. So, yeah.
If each of you had one thing that you'd really like to say? Our audience isn't vast, but there will be a good, 10,000 people hearing this in the first week alone, and then it'll just build from there, more or less endlessly. What message? Why don't we start with you, Amber? Maybe you don't have some message you want to say, but I really admire the way you're finding your power and you're speaking out, and you're becoming a powerful leader. And if you had one thing to say to our podcast fans, would there be something that you'd want to say?
Yes, and thank you for this opportunity. Mine would be that, Team CBT has been a powerful force in life. And if you are Black, if you identify as Black, African American, or Black African and are practicing team, no, do not have to do it out there on your own. We have an affinity group, a group that's willing to support you along the way and connect with your colleagues, and as well as your other all colleagues. But definitely, we have a space for you, and you're welcome in our group.
See, that's what I'm talking about, because what a warm thing. See, you could have made some political statement or some intellectual statement, but it was just a warm, kind, compassionate, welcoming family type of thing. That's exactly what I was referring to, and I just love what you said there. How about you, Shawn?
I would say, I think, well, actually, can I share? I don't think I've ever told you. Can I share a brief story?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So I don't think I've ever told you, and this all gets back to, the message I want to get across. How I was introduced to your work, even way before I moved to California. But it was around like 2000, and I was about to, right before I was about to start at OSU, getting my bachelor's degree, and I went into Barnes and Nobles, and I was kind of looking at, just kind of always look at the self-help section. That's kind of my thing. And so I was looking at some, at the books, some books that I wanted to check out, but everything was so expensive. There was nothing that I was a broke college student. And so I literally was, heading out the store, and there was this table and of these books. And one of the books, bright yellow book, it was like Feeling Good. And I was like, what's this? And I just kind of picked it up, and I'm like looking through it, and like all the stuff that was in there just completely like resonated with me. All the issues that I had been through: anxiety, depression, perfectionism, guilt, and then of course like the cognitive distortions. And I was like, oh my God, like this is, and so I'm thinking like, there's no way I'm going to be able to afford this. And so I flipped the book over, and I think it was like $8.95. And I'm like, how is this book right here, and this is better than all these other books. And so I actually had enough money to actually purchase the book. And literally, like, just as a Black man, like, just, it really changed my real view and the way that I just kind of interact with the world. But it's also changed me as a person, but it also changed me as professionally, as a clinician. And so I would say the message that I want to get out is that I want to be able to disseminate like this powerful approach, particularly to clinicians of color, African descent, to everybody, but in particular, people of color, just because given that there's so few of us. And I think this, approach, Team CBT, just has the power to help out many, many people.
Thanks you. That's awesome. I love your story, and that was more the same thing that Amber. You were trying to make David feel good, and you were being kindly to David and trying to include me and to honor me, and I really appreciate that and touched by that. And I'm just always been so happy to have you in our group. And when you returned after you had moved to the Midwest, I mean, Boy, I'm so grateful to the pandemic for all the blessings it's brought us. It's brought a lot of pain to a lot of people, but boy, it made us go virtual, and all of a sudden there you were back in our group again, and just like when you had first joined around 2008. And boy, I'm so grateful for that. Thank you, Shawn. And Chelsea, your turn.
Yes. Okay. Well, that's so funny. The thing I was thinking about is that when I took a CBT course in college, same story where I remember that's how I actually found your book, and how many years later, Alicia Beal brought me to your Tuesday group in 2017 when I lived in the Bay Area. And I couldn't believe that you were the person that wrote that. But I just remember thinking, like, how is this possible? And same thing. And I laughed earlier when you made that comment about what you learned and how much money you paid. And it was true. Like, I felt like here we are, like this should have been our road to licensure. It was just like through this framework. And a blessing of the pandemic for me was that, I had to part ways with Team CBT and the potential of FGI when I moved, and then came the pandemic, and I found myself working there and being able to be, unfortunately, I have 3 small children. So your Tuesday group still is hard for me, but I get the blessings of being around Angela every Thursday virtually in her group. So I think that's been just the fact that we can circle back to find this has just been such a blessing. And that for me, want to be able to, now that we do have so many means of virtual Zoom and everything, that we can just offer this and connect with people all over, and be able to just from the heart, like just say, this is such an amazing framework and model that, and it works for everybody, and to be able to pass that on to people that might otherwise not get access to it, or word of mouth hear about it. That's just to me, just a very inspiring and motivating mission. And just very appreciative of everything.
Thank you for that. And Rhonda, maybe you can bring us to closure.
Well, I just feel really honored that you guys took the time out of your schedule to come and join us on the podcast and, present your wisdom and your experience to our team community around the world. And, I just wish that everyone who has the opportunity to work with you can do that, both as clients and colleagues and therapists, to learn from you. So thank you so much.
Okay. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes under the podcast page. You will also find archives of previous episodes and many resources for therapists and non-therapists. We welcome your comments and questions. If you want to support the show, please share the podcast with people who might benefit from it. You could also go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski, the director of the Feeling Great Therapy Center. We hope you enjoyed this episode. I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.